and very fortunate working in an organization where mentorship and developing talent is a big part of that culture. 22 years and counting, I'm still around. That means there's something that is right in the waters out here.
Welcome back to another episode of Tea Talks, where we dive into the stories behind the leaders shaping our world. I'm your host, TJ Walia. Today, we're thrilled to host Sarvpreet Singh Gandhi, a distinguished banking professional with over 2 decades of rich experience in the financial services industry. Known for his exemplary leadership, Sarvpreet has a passion for nurturing talent, proven by his commitment to coaching and mentoring. His leadership philosophy is centered around empowering teams, fostering a culture of innovation, and driving them towards achieving ambitious goals. Sarvpreet, welcome to Tea Talks.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you for having me on the show today.
It's an absolute pleasure, and I'd love, for the stories that we're going to be talking about today. You've had an incredible journey, Sarvpreet. Like it's, you're climbing in the ranks of the banking sector. You're a VP currently. I'd love for our audience to understand what that journey looked like, where the starting was, where the beginning was, and that pivotal point that really transformed your journey to say, you know what, when you look back, this is what led me to this destination today. And, and you're obviously going to grow and go to other great places. But the place you're at today, what was that turning point that brought you here?
Yeah, thanks for that question, TJ. And actually, you know what, you absolutely said it right. It's been quite a journey for me. It kind of started about actually now 22 years ago when I arrived to Canada. In fact, it was May 2nd when I arrived in Canada in 2020. It's 2002, I believe. And it's been 22 years since then. And when I started over here, of course, new to Canada, of course, everybody has a similar kind of challenges. And again, times was a little bit different around that time as such, and where Canadian experience was something that everybody was looking for. And it's interesting that, when you come to Canada, you do not have Canadian experience, but you do have a lot of skill set. And that's who I was. I started my journey by looking out for jobs and opportunities which are here, having a good educational background. I'm a CFA MBA from back home in India. And I was, of course, looking for opportunities to kind of align with those qualifications. As everybody goes through that challenge, I believe, I was not getting through with much. A lot of course, people telling you what can you do and what can you do different. One of the things that did come up was you need to change. And again, people were not being very specific. And at some point, actually, a couple of them, good friends of mine, I would say, they said, well, being a turban Sikh, it is going to be very difficult for you to establish, a presence or, find a good job, especially if you want to get into banking because it's a frontline role and things like that. And of course, I was also advised to look into other roles which are potentially not aligned with your background as such, but you can still stay, as turban Sikh, but potentially do some other roles which are not frontline as such. That kind of made me a bit of a setback because coming to Canada, I was not thinking on those lines. But my appearance, my identity, being a Sikh, was very important to me. So, it came to a point where I was debating whether I should be staying around or I should be going back. And talking about a pivotal point, actually, it was before I even started my career with Bank of Montreal. And that was, I was actually watching a program, and it was probably, I believe it was an Omni channel as such. And it was a short interview with Sabi Marwa. And Sabi, as you probably know, is, of course, he went on to do great things. But at that point in time, he was a Scotia Bank executive. And again, he was talking about his journey a little bit as such. It was a short clip. But what I took away from that was, if a turban Sikh who came here in Canada in the late 70s, 80s as such, and they could actually make a career out of that, and actually are in a pretty prominent position. He was an executive even at that time in a bank, in one of the big 5 Canadian banks as such. I think I've got a good shot at this. So I would say that was my pivotal point to focus my energies on doing the right thing, which is making sure, I've got the skill set, and I'm pretty sure that with my background and experience, I do deserve a shot. So that's what led to, actually joining one of those co-op programs that actually were run by the government. And it was different peel adult co-op program that I joined. And going through that process, I actually got a chance to join Bank of Montreal, and I joined Bank of Montreal as a CSR, which is a customer service representative in the front line, starting right from the bottom, as you call it, but a very important role. And I always say this with a lot of pride, and I share that with my team as well. It's one of the best roles one can do in the banking sector, because you are with the clients every single day, serving them and being with them. So it's one of the best roles where I could learn a lot, start from the beginning, and then, of course, work your way through.
Wow, wow. Quite a journey there, Sarvpreet. There's a lot to unpack there as well. From the biases and the discrimination aspect that Sikhs faced, and we continue to face in certain aspects even today. But even then, it was a lot more prominent. And you're taking me right back into the story with my father. And my father came here in 1987, so a little bit prior to your arrival. But with him, getting a job wasn't an option. You talked about skills versus Canadian experiences. That's a whole other aspect as well that I want to dig into. But with my father, the challenge was that he had his own business back in India. So for him to have any Canadian experience that would be relevant didn't make any sense at all. So the challenge he faced was that he wasn't getting opportunities. So he actually went into business with my uncle, and they became successful in the business. But through that journey, my father actually had to remove his turban, unfortunately, and it was one of the hardest things. And sorry, I'm getting a little emotional going through. It was one of the hardest things for any Sikh to do, but he had no choice at the time because he had no way of going back, especially in the 80s, because of the political landscape of India at the time, and because of his settlement here, he had to move forward. However, he did, go back and basically, regain his Sikhism and Sikhi to the same extent where he's tying the turban again. But it took that impact, and it's something that none of us should go through. And I don't know if you've seen Rosie Kaur. She's on LinkedIn. She's actually been introducing the Patka box. She's actually a great friend of mine, and I was so excited to see the launch of the Patka box, so that kids today don't have to face that discrimination or that racism and have to be forced to remove their turban, right? And whether it's forcefully or not being proud of it, and we know the connection that we have to the turban. So it's just hearing that aspect of it, and your courage to kind of look at someone else as a mentor and say, you know what, this is something someone else can do, then I can also do this. So kudos to you. Kudos to my father for having to go through that journey, because it was as hard as it was, and then going right back and saying, you know what, I've established myself, because he was actually also in retail, and it was retail clothing, women's clothing. So there was a big barrier there, and there's no excuses for any of it. And I think in hindsight, there's different aspects and ways we can look at it, but the decisions had to be made, and there's many that made those decisions, unfortunately. But I'm proud to say that it was a part of him, and he wanted to be back on that aspect of it. I want to touch on the skills and the Canadian experience aspect that you talked about. This is a big problem that happens with all of us. I graduated from university here, and it was skills versus experience, and what can you do and it's an ongoing battle. It's almost like an excuse to say, no, you know what, you're just not the right person. How did you overcome that? You had those skills. What was that process like for you in that interview process to say, I have what it takes, give me a shot?
Yeah, I mean, TJ, that's a great one. In fact, it's not just my own experience, but of course, I've hired many individuals all through my career as such, and we still continue to do that. So it's a question that it's on everybody's mind. But I think just from the experience perspective and the Canadian experience perspective, I think that was a big hurdle, as I mentioned earlier. And again, you know what? I think it's about what value do you bring to whatever role you're applying. I think from my perspective, I've always, again, I do mentor a lot of individuals and I talk to a lot of people nowadays. But and my approach was also the same, which is I know who I am and I know what my skill sets are. but I have to be very much aware of who my competition is. And that's what the key part is to success would be is if you do not know who you're competing against, how will you position yourself to compete in that particular job or whether it's anything else for that matter. So I think that's something which I've always believed in myself as to what I bring in and how I could be better or a value add compared to anybody else out there. So understanding that landscape is very important. I think even in today's date, and it goes back to any for anything that you are trying to do. But in terms of the experience, I think that's something that's I think now that 22 years in Canada as such, I will admit that there are slight nuances, and again, those are getting less and less as, of course, the world is getting as one place as such. But there are slight nuances, and again, simple things like it's cultural. It's not that you don't know or you don't have a skill set, but it comes down to some very simple, basic cultural stuff. And I'll give you a very simple example is in India, and of course, when I came from over there, when a senior walks in, normally you would either stand up or at least address them as sir or ma'am, and that's not happened. That's not how it works over here. So I do recall, that was some of the things that I actually did learn from the co-op program. So of course, going into the co-op program, a lot of us may have the mindset like, what can that teach us? Like, I know everything about my job. I know about my industry. It's not teaching about anything about the industry. What it does is actually helps you open up your mind and have that progressive mindset and say, what's there for me to understand about this culture? And I think, one of the things that I would say is addressing someone with a sir or ma'am and getting out of it is difficult. And again, I still meet a lot of people who address you by sir or ma'am, and it's a tough one to get over with. But again, one has to change or adapt, and that is the key. I would say these are small nuances, small things that people overlook because we are focused too much on experience, skill set, what's your background. But I think these things do matter. Of course, culture, work environment, this is what makes the difference from one place to another. I still recall, to be very honest, like changing that to, in my first, and actually it was within the first 3 months of my role, I actually had an opportunity as working the bank as in one of the frontline roles. I had an opportunity to meet the CEO of the bank, Tony Comper, at that point in time, which is a very rare opportunity to get actually. So I was lucky to be there. But once again, you address the CEO of the bank with their first name and you shake hands, and that's how it works. Whereas I would say it's not the same, or at least 20 years ago, it was not the same in an Indian work culture as such. You would call them by Mr. and their last name because it's a little bit of a more of the British influence in that work culture, which I'm not saying one is wrong and the other is right. I think it's actually acknowledging what are the differences and then picking it up and making it again to your strengths.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's you're so right on that. It's in my 2 decades in the corporate world, I spent 15 at Microsoft, and one of the things I should tell people is it's easy to learn the job, but understanding the company's culture, understanding how the company's dynamics are, how they operate, how you connect with people within it is one of the hardest things that people will learn and adapt. And if you can say you can pick that up, the job is easy. It's easy to learn any job within a matter of months. I would say not even years. Months you can learn a job, and you can get really good at it. Culture takes years, right? Culture takes years, and I've seen that through and through. Where I remember, I mean, many instances. We were in Microsoft at a conference, and we saw our worldwide CTO, and there was about 25,000 people at this conference at this event, and he was there, and he had a few security guards, and everyone was just like crowded around him. And one of my friends, and I was new to the company at the time as well, and one of my friends was like, "Oh, that's such and such," and he's a big shot, and he's the CTO and whatnot. I'm like, "Oh, let me go see him." He's like, "Oh, you can't just meet him like that." I'm like, "Sure, I can." So I went right up to him, walked up to him, shook his hand, and called him by his first name, like I said, and just had a conversation. Turned out he was also from Toronto, And we actually became friends after that. And so every time we'd be at the events, we'd actually see each other and we would joke. And, and I have him on WhatsApp now, even we'll send messages from time to time, but he's retired. But the point is, it's that cultural aspect, having that understanding. I knew I could walk up there with many others. It's a barrier. It's like, no, we can't do this. Or, this person is of such high ranks and we can't approach them. That's not the culture in Canada. That's not the culture in the US. It's really about you can be able to, connect with whoever you need and have that conversation. Now, we had Satya Nadella come into our Toronto office at one point, and I went up there and said, I'm going to go see him. And I went there and shook his hand and saw him and said hello. But a lot of people are just afraid of doing something like that. So it's very important for us to understand and adapt that culture aspect of it. So now, Sarvpreet, I want to touch on something else that we've kind of touched on, kind of in ways where you've hinted at it in the conversation. But mentorship, you talked about seeing a role model do something, and you're like, what, I can also do this. What kind of role has mentorship played for you beyond that experience itself? Whether it's receiving mentorship or giving mentorship. Love to understand a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question because I think in order to be successful for most of the individuals in their corporate life, I think mentorship plays a pretty vital role. It has in mine, and I think from my perspective, I actually take pride and actually now being in that role. So of course, I still receive. I've got still my mentors out there who actually help me out, as well as I always am looking for opportunities where I can give it back as such. So, but from my own perspective, I think, right from the very beginning, I've been very lucky and very fortunate working in an organization where, again, mentorship and developing talent is a big part of that culture. 22 years and counting, I'm still around. That means there's something that is right in the waters out here. So, I think right from the very beginning, whether it's your own leader, your manager, or it could be anybody else, or those individuals can move on to other roles and they can still be in touch with you and guide you. Mentorship, again, it comes in different ways. It can be a formal way of structuring things up so that you can have regular touch points with an individual, or it could be just ad hoc where you can just reach out and just, if you have an idea in mind or if something is coming across, just to get a second opinion. I think, and I've used both very effectively for both receiving as a mentee and, of course, doing it as a mentor as well. I do recall one of the things that very early on in my career, one of my managers actually said to me. He's retired by now, but he really helped me a lot during all through my career, guiding me. But he is one of the things I would quote him is, early in my career, as I was looking at, well, you know what, 2-3 years in the role, now I need to look at outside and go grow outside of BMO as such. And he said, if there is a job in financial services, it does exist in BMO. It's the question is, how do you get there? And I think that really resonated with me a lot. And in fact, I use that quote, Paul Bashane, his name. I use this quote all the time, actually, while I'm doing my, mentorship with others as well. Because, you don't have to look outside. Again, to your point earlier, we talked about culture. It takes time to understand and get used to the culture. So if you are in there and you like it, and it resonates with your values, you can grow a lot. And Gigi, I can tell you, in the 22 years, and I did not get into my journey as such too much because we can go on for the whole day for that. But in my 22 years of my journey with BMO, I've done 11 different distinct roles at BMO.
Wow. Wow.
And that is because, not because I was jumping around all the time, but mostly it was, opportunities came up and there were leaders, mentors looking out for you and taking care of you. So, most of the times these roles came up as, hey, this is a great opportunity for you. Would you be interested? And to the point, actually, it came out as one of the opportunities was, hey, are you interested in moving into Vancouver? And that happened in 2014. And one of my leaders said, hey, are you interested in moving to Vancouver? And I said, sure, for what? We don't know yet, but I'm pretty sure we'll figure out something. That's a huge risk to take. Especially when you're talking about moving your kids who were my kids. I've got two kids. They were very young. They were in elementary school at that time, and just picking up your family and moving. Hey, I've done it once. I've moved across the continents. Why not across the cities as such? And my response was, sure, count me in. When do you want me to come? And it just happened very quickly. And guess what? It was again one of the moments where it's if you pause and reflect and say, what was I thinking at that point in time? But now that you come to think about it, the experience, the learnings, the opportunity that it brought up, and what I gained out of that, not just from the geography perspective, working in a different part of the country as such, and gaining that experience. And of course, getting that experience for your family as well, exposing them to a different friends circle as such. All these things, they do matter. So I know you talked about mentorship, but again, this was just I went in a different direction. But these things do matter, where these people around you and leaders and mentors can actually help you guide. At the end of the day, it is your decision. You know what? You cannot blame anybody, but you can definitely credit them for part of your success for sure. So I would say a lot of who I am today is definitely due to great leaders and mentors that I've had. And I always try to give it back as much as possible to my teams and otherwise anybody who is looking for
Oh, I love that. I love the aspect of mentors looking out for you. And one of my guests actually put it in a different perspective as well when I asked them a similar question. And they said there's mentorship and sponsorship, right? Sponsorship are, those individuals who are out there that are sponsoring you, that are rooting for you, that are looking out for you. And that's exactly what, your experience was. But I think before we get to them doing that, I think there's a opportunity where we have to raise up our hand and say, hey, listen, this is what I'm looking to do. This is what I'm capable of doing. This is what I'm aspiring to do. And you strike up those conversations. And when that opportunity for Vancouver came up, there's a reason why they selected you. It wasn't something out of the blue, but they knew that there was appetite. There's someone who's hungry to do something, make an impact, have a change. Maybe this is the right opportunity for this person. And not only did you, show your interest, you said, yeah, let's go, let's do this, right? And that becomes so paramount. A lot of people freeze up in those situations. They're like, oh, I don't know what to do, or is this the right thing for me? And they just start over analyzing. And by then the opportunity is gone. There's a very small window in these opportunities. And when you can be fast enough to jump on it, that's when the beauty happens. And I did that early in my career when I was approached by Microsoft. It's like, "Can you want to go to Edmonton?" I'd never left my house. I'd never left my backyard. And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." I had a 1-year-old. My wife knew no one in Edmonton. We're like, "Let's go." Right? Went there, spent a couple of years, came back, and that really helped one build trust within the organization.
that.
Right, that hey, this is the guy who can go out and do it, and he's going to do it well, and he's willing to take that risk. The other aspect is that you learn so much more valuable experiences by going through a different city, a different country sometimes, and a different environment, because the way they do business there is totally different. I had no idea how much Edmonton hated Toronto, and I learned that really, really effectively there. Even my teammates, because Toronto considers themselves, at least in their perspective, as a center of the universe. And so I had a lot of interesting insights, which I had never been exposed to because I was always in Toronto. So lots of valuable experiences you get, lots of understanding. And the one aspect I think that stuck out really well for me was when they said, we're not sure why that you're going to go to Vancouver. We're not sure what that is going to look like. We're not sure what any of that is. That's opportunity. Majority of the people will shy away from that and say, I'm not touching this. Is this a trap? Is this it? No. And I've been in a similar situation where I was handed customer accounts that were not the best. And I labeled myself as, hey, I'm the cleanup guy. If there's situation that's not going well, I roll up my sleeves, I go in there, I clean up, and then I'm out. Right? That's what I started seeing myself as and saying, I can do this. So any of this problematic accounts or situations that I might have been introduced to, no problem, right? You have to be able to step up to the challenge. And that's what helps with growth. That's what helps with others seeing that trust in you as well. Your advice for individuals who are looking to seek mentorship? Because when I was going through that journey myself, there were times where I didn't understand how to make and build that relationship. So I was sometimes trying to, hey, can you mentor me? For what? I don't know, just mentor me, right? And so you learn over the years, but what's your advice on someone who doesn't have a mentor, doesn't know where to start? What should that look like for them?
Yeah, TJ, I think that's one question that a lot of people actually struggle with because when you hear about mentorship, you say, "Yeah, I would like to get a mentor." For what? And that's exactly the question. And I think it kind of starts with what exactly are you looking to do, or what exactly are you looking mentorship for, right? And again, in some of my recent interactions, it has been, well, you know what? Because you've done this role, maybe I would like to understand about this role a little bit more. And it's not about the role per se, and that's where it comes down to really is, people get sometimes stuck about because you have done that role, I would like to learn about that role. That's not mentorship. That you can have it with me in a coffee chat and we can get over with that. I think it's more about this is who I am, and this is something that I would like to explore, or these are the areas that I would like to actually know more about. Help me understand. Or it could be, I would like to know a little bit about your journey and I would like to share my journey, and then, try and understand and help me understand where my opportunities are. So I think it sometimes becomes a little bit of a difficult conversation because, and when I say difficult means because as a mentee, you have to do your groundwork, which is understand what exactly you're looking for in that relationship. And most of the times, a lot of people come across and say, well, I'm here for mentorship. And it kind of stops over there. I know I kind of repeat that because trust me, it's 7 or 8 times out of 10, that's really how it kind of starts off with. But then I think it's also important that we all have to understand, like at times people are not really clear as to what's the next step or what they want to do, what their strengths are, and helping them identify those things is where actually I think is the value add of a mentor. Helping understand individuals, and that's what has happened with me as well, is what are your strengths and what are the opportunities that you should be working on, rather than help me build my career in this particular field as such. And I think there's more value add in that versus saying, well, I want my next role as this. Tell me how do I get there? I think it's saying the same thing in a different way, which is these are my strengths, these are my opportunities, these are my challenges. Help me overcome this because I would like to get ready for the next opportunity. And it could be anything. And again, that's the kind of mindset that I have. I know some can relate to it, the others don't, because most individuals are very focused and very directed at this is exactly what I want to do. I've been very open ended and open minded in terms of exploring opportunities. So that's where I think I have built my career, and I believe that a lot of people can be successful if they just open up their horizon a little bit more and say, well, I'm open to exploring opportunities. Help me understand how. And that's where I would say I can definitely help. So that's where I would start off for someone who is looking for mentorship is understanding first who you are and what you are looking for, and then be prepared to have that conversation. And then for sure, the flow goes from
Absolutely. And again, amazing pieces of advice there, Sarvpreet. There's so many different components of it. One of the things that I would recommend for people to do as well, and this is something I started doing, is once I realized that just going with, hey, mentor me doesn't work because no one knows. We need to identify what we want to do. No one's a mind reader. No one's psychic. No one's going to be able to come in and say, hey, this is exactly what you should do. And if they do, I'd be careful as well because there's something else going on there because
there.
a lot of us don't identify what we want. So one of the activities I used to do actually was I would actually do a SWOT analysis on myself. And I would go on a whiteboard in my room. I've got a large whiteboard on the side here as well. And I would do this every 6 months and chart out what are my strengths, what are my opportunities, where do I want to go, and then see what I need to obtain for that. Because of that, you wouldn't believe I've had roles in sales, marketing, technical support, and management. Like I've done it all
Yeah.
because I want to gain those skills. And those skills were aligned because eventually I wanted to run my own business. So I needed to have all of this. So you have to know where you want to go. You have to have that direction. And sometimes you don't have the full path right out of the gates. And that's where the mentor comes in. Say, listen, if I want to run a business, and I had this conversation with one of my mentors at Microsoft, and I said, listen, I want to run a business eventually. What does that look like? My family comes from an entrepreneurship world. I'm constantly thinking of ideas. I have some great ideas. How do I bring this to life? And he said, go run one of our products and see how that goes. And that's exactly what I did. I went and ran the IoT business for Microsoft Canada. Said, I want to go try this. But to the conversation we were having earlier, I said, no, this isn't your wheelhouse. This isn't your background. You come from technical support and enterprise services and consulting business. How are you going to run this? And I said, I'll figure it out. So I started building those skills. I started understanding what's required. I started learning, and I kept on having that relationship with those individuals. And the person who hired me said, you've been a pain in the butt for the past 2 years, and I can see how badly you want this. So they actually gave me a shot, and I did well at it. I did well at it in the sense that because I was so driven to go and do this. And for me, it was more of the learning. So people have to understand that just because you don't have a skill doesn't mean you can't go do something. I don't hire based on what someone's background is anymore. I hire based on what someone's potential is. How badly do they want to go do this? How badly do they want to learn this? Right? That's what inspires me to hire these people and say, this is amazing. Like, if this is the impact you want to drive, let's go. I'll support you. I'll guide you. And I love unlocking that aspect of people, just seeing them light up when they're like, wow, I can do this. And they do it well. Of course, we're going to fumble. Of course, we're going to learn things. Of course, we're going to have areas that we're going to fail in. But that shouldn't stop us. That shouldn't discourage us, right? Yeah. The other aspect I want to touch on is having the open-mindedness, right? You talked about, and that groundwork that we have to do it for ourselves. Any advice that you have for people to do? I kind of shared about what I do. Anything you do in your day-to-day to understand, hey, this is who I am. This is where I want to go. And how do I fill that gap, or how do I cover that gap? What's required? What's your advice there?
Yeah, so I think I'll actually go back to my origins, as I would say. Being a Sikh, as you know, is a student. Being a Sikh means being a student, and that's what I actually very much firmly believe in, which is it's a lifelong journey to learn every single day. Every day actually gives you a new learning as such, and I think having that mindset has really helped me, because there's when we say there's an opportunity every time around you. I think you can only get there by having that kind of mindset to open those pieces as such and say, what can I learn from this situation or this particular interaction as such? Or for that matter, if there's an opportunity in terms of a job which is coming up, what can I learn from there? So it's an ongoing learning piece, that mindset one has to have. And that actually helps you, again, grow into a lot of other things that you can actually explore. So for me, it's constant learning. And the second thing which I would actually bring up to this one is, making small changes. It's not about that big leap every time. It's a big change. That's one big thing that you need to do to get there. And again, in businesses, we talk about that all the time. Aspirational goals and targets. Yes, absolutely. We want them. And I love that. I thrive on that. But how do you actually break it down to those tiny bits? I'm an avid reader, and I'll quote actually a couple of things, which is, I was reading recently The Tiny Habits from BJ Fogg. And again, these are all behavioral science books as such, Atomic Habits. But there's so much of wealth of information, and you kind of the things that are there in that resonated with me in terms of making those small changes every single day and every single thing that you're doing. So having that open mind to learn and adapt, and actually, and from there you can build from strength to strength, I would say. And that's what's been my focus or my agenda, I would say. And I think it has worked for me so far.
I love that aspect of it, Sarvpreet. You're talking about mindset. You're talking about those components of it. And you're talking about Sikhism, right? And Sikhism, a lot of that mindset is given to us. It's handed down to us. And I think it's a blessing a lot of people don't realize. And one of the phrases I love using is chaddi kala, right? Which is in rising spirits. And we always have to be in rising spirits. And that helps us with the growth mindset aspect of it. And that's what I teach my kids. For those who are not privy to the same, and it's also from our community as well, they don't understand the same interpretations the same way, and they're not really as connected. There's a journey through it. What's your advice to having a growth mindset? Because I think that's where it starts. Once you start identifying that you need to have a growth mindset rather than I can't do this or I can't do that or I can't do this or this role isn't for me or I'll never make it there. Instead of that, how do you shift that mindset for yourself, and how do you advise others to do that?
Yeah, TA. I mean, there's lots of things that one can do, but I think one of the things that is very important is you have to make sure that you are surrounded by people who have the similar kind of an approach. Again, a negativity can create negativity around you for sure, but I think it's important that you are relating to individuals who also are having a similar approach to doing things, who are also open to learning, adapting, and also reinventing themselves as we go along. So I think it breeds amongst each other as such, and it helps to have that mindset ongoing as such. It definitely helps you to develop not only your teams, but also develop talent within your teams. And you can identify people with that growth mindset that can actually take you forward and your team forward.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Sarvpreet. And I think it reminds me of a situation where even at Microsoft, because we're always on bleeding edge technology. So there's always constant learning. And on top of the work that you're doing, there's always the pressure to, how do you stay on top? And one of the things I did was I actually created a small group. And every Friday for an hour, we would basically have it's a self-learning session. Whoever wants to learn their own thing, but we kind of helped elevate one another and say, we're going to be in this Teams call or, in this one room, everyone do their work that they need to do. We need to ask for advice, guidance, great. But if not, just learn. And it really set a dedicated time for that self-learning and self-development and self-growth, and really emphasized us to do that. And then we, one, blocked out the calendars. And then two, we got to connect. And then three, we actually were enhancing one another through all that as well. So great advice there, and great tactical uses that we can do there. One of the things I've started with my kids very early, and I still do, is instead of saying I don't know how to do this, or I won't be able to, or I can't do this, I say add the word yet at the end of it. So it's like I can't do this yet, and it's the first step in conditioning the mind to go in and say, you know what, I don't have what I need to do this now, but we're going to make progress towards it. And sometimes I would have my kids, like they'll try to make a drawing and they would start crying because it didn't turn out the way they wanted it, right? And I said, hey, it's okay. It's your first attempt at it. And I would call the word fail is first attempt in learning. So reconditioning the mind to say, this is okay. We're taught in the school system that it's either pass or fail. And if you fail, your life is destroyed. And if you pass, it's great. That's not the case. We learn from our mistakes day in, day out. Day in, day out, we're learning from them. Yet in our systems, in our school system, we're conditioning them to say, no, this is life's over if you fail on this, and this is how hard this is. It shouldn't be like that. And I remember my daughters, when they came home from some of their tests, and they'd be like, oh, Dad, I got 81% or 78%, and they would start crying. I'm like, why are you crying? Like, I never added this pressure on you. I'm not the one that's telling you that you have to achieve this or achieve that. Did you learn? Did you put your best effort in? That's what I want you to learn. You didn't get the test wrong. It was the preparation for the test that you failed, right? How do we better your preparation for that test so that next time you do that better? That's the mindset we have to start changing for them, rather than saying, looking at the result and say, hey, this is it. This was a bad result. It's like, no, what led up to that result?
Yeah.
What did we do for that? And the same goes for our work environments. When we don't do something right, we look at it and say, oh, I can't do this. I'll never get this right. We do that self-sabotage, self-talk. We need to eliminate that, because that is where it all starts from. And I always tell people this as well. It's not anyone else who stops us from achieving great success or goals. It's ourselves, right? If we want to achieve something, it's usually us who have self-doubt and don't have the ability to defeat our own selves to get past that. And once you've done that, you can do anything and everything. I remember when I started doing my videos on LinkedIn, there was a big barrier with my own self, because everyone has, and I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people have that hesitation of, I can't do video, I can't do this. I just started doing them and said, you know what, forget it. And I would get my kids or my wife saying, you don't look like this, or, I'm like, I don't care anymore. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what it is. It's the messaging that I need to get out there. That's what I'm focused on. But that's how you get past that. We all deal with it. We all have it.
Yeah.
Right. So those are great aspects of it. So next thing we want to change it up to is our wonderful segment of the rapid fire section. So the rules are simple, Sarvpreet. I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to give me the first thing that comes to mind, and whatever that first response is, and that's what we'll go with. So you ready for this?
Okay, we are going live.
Yes, we are. The first one's easy, and given your Indian and your background, I think I know the answer for this, but let's start with it, and I could be wrong. Tea or coffee?
Coffee.
Really? Okay, now we're going to have a whole separate segment on this one then. I thought it would be chai or tea or something along those lines, but wow. Okay, we'll have a separate segment on this and another conversation.
We're going to remove our biases, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Remove our biases. We cannot be biased about it. So yes,
you're right.
Sure.
You're right. And we're adapting to the culture, right? We're talking about. So.
Yes.
No, I love that. I love that. So I'm not going to take any guesses on this one. So I'm gonna wait for your response. Favorite food?
I would say Indian for sure.
Oh, see, I should have guessed on this one then. All right. One gadget you can't live without.
My phone.
Your wake up time.
5 a.m.
5 a.m. Okay. Your activity to disconnect and recharge.
I spend time with my family.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. The strangest thing in your closet.
Ooh. That is a tough one. I'll have to go and probably look into it, but I would say there's lots of stuff, but I think I would say probably my weird coin collection. I love collecting coins. Yeah.
Okay. Your favorite book, given that you're an avid reader?
My favorite book is actually Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah. No, I have that one as well. We'll chat about that one at one point. And your favorite color turban?
Oh, there's so many. Come on. That's you don't put me in that. But my favorite color is green, but I would say my color turban would be maybe red. Let's go with that.
Okay. Love it. Love it. And if animals could talk, which one would you want to have a conversation with outside of any pets that you may have?
I would like to talk to a bear.
A bear. Okay. Love these answers. I love it. Well, Sarvpreet, thank you very much for being here today. Really appreciated the conversation and you taking the time out to join us. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for having me, TJ.
Thank you, Sarvpreet, for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us today. It's been a true pleasure. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in again. Be sure to subscribe to Tea Talks for more conversations with the leaders who are shaping our future. Until next time, keep on inspiring.